Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lori Marie from the Mental Health Association of Rhode Island. There are many factors that can affect our mental health. Genes play a role, our trauma history, stress management, emotional self-regulation skills, loneliness and a lack of social support, chronic illness, lack of sleep, life circumstances, and nutrition. And that's what we will talk about today, the interaction between what we eat and how we feel. So today I am absolutely delighted to share with you a conversation I'm having with one of my health heroes, Dr. Michael Greger. Dr. Greger is a founding member and fellow of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and he's a physician and internationally recognized speaker on nutrition. His science-based nonprofit, nutritionfacts.org, offers a free online portal hosting more than 2,000 videos and articles on myriad health topics. Dr. Greger is a sought-after lecturer and has presented at the Conference on World Affairs and the World Bank. He's testified before Congress and was invited as an expert witness in Oprah Winfrey's defense in the infamous meat defamation trial. A graduate of Cornell University School of Agriculture and Tufts University School of Medicine, Dr. Greger is also an acclaimed author. His books, which I have and highly recommend, are How Not to Die Cookbook, and How Not to Diet, and they became instant New York Times bestsellers. More than 1 million copies of How Not to Die have been sold, and always all proceeds Dr. Greger receives from the sales of his books and speaking honoraria are donated back to charity. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Greger. Welcome.
I'm so glad to be here. Let's do this.
How did you get into what is lifestyle medicine? What is that exactly?
Yeah, so this is using lifestyle approaches such as diet and exercise to not only prevent disease, but to treat, potentially reverse it as well. And my interest really goes back to my grandmother. I was just a kid when my grandma was sent home in a wheelchair to die. She had end-stage heart disease, already had so many bypass surgeries, basically run out of plumbing at some point, confined in a wheelchair, crushing chest pain. There was nothing more they could do. Her life was over at age 65.
Wow.
But then she heard about this guy, Nathan Pritikin, one of our early lifestyle medicine pioneers. What happened next is actually detailed in Pritikin's biography. He talks about Frances Greger, my grandmother, where they wheeled her in, and a few weeks later, she walked out. And though she was given a medical death sentence at age 65, thanks to a healthy diet, was able to enjoy another 31 years on this planet until age 96, to continue to enjoy her 6 grandkids, including me. That's why I went into medicine. That's why I practice lifestyle medicine, why I started nutritionfacts.org, why I wrote the book How Not to Die, why all the proceeds I receive from the sales of all my books are all donated to charity. I just want to do for everyone's family what Pritikin did for my family.
That's beautiful. That's amazing. So we're talking about mental health and nutrition. Are there any notable studies that come to your mind that speak to that connection?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, there's lots of observational data, meaning, like cohort studies where they follow people in their diets over time, and they see, for example, who becomes depressed, who becomes anxious, and try to correlate that with changes in diet. Unfortunately, there are so-called confounding factors. So just because people who eat lots of fruits and vegetables, for example, are less likely to suffer from mental illness, doesn't necessarily mean cause and effect, because maybe there's other things tied. So, for example, maybe they're exercising more, and exercise can certainly decrease risk of, for example, depression. And so how do we know? What we need are interventional studies where we actually split people up into 2 groups and put people on different diets and actually see what changes with their mood. And there aren't many of those studies, but there have been a few. One was done at the University of Arizona, where they showed that by removing meat, fish, chicken, and other meat, and eggs from people's diet, they got a significant improvement in mood within just 2 weeks. That's the fastest. There's no other lifestyle intervention has ever been shown, no other diet ever been shown to do that. Significant improvement in mood within 2 weeks. They think, and we're not sure exactly why, the thing was the arachidonic acid. So arachidonic acid is a pro-inflammatory long-chain omega-6 fatty acid found predominantly in chicken and eggs, but found throughout animal products, mostly chicken and eggs. So by removing eggs, chicken, and other meat from their diet, they thought they were decreasing neuroinflammation, brain inflammation, such that within 2 weeks you're able to clear enough inflammation from the brain, and that may have been the cause of the improvement in mood. And so therefore proving kind of cause and effect. So it's not just that healthier, mentally healthier people tend to eat healthier diets, where you say, well, which came first? Did they feel great, so ate great? Who needs comfort foods if you don't need to be comforted, right? So this actually shows that, it was actually the diet. Making a dietary change could actually improve mood compared to the control group that didn't change their diet at all.
So it sounds like you're saying that specific animal products, particularly, did you say chicken and eggs, create inflammation in our brain, and then the inflammation in our brain creates a feeling of depression, emotional depression?
Right. And so this was a normal population. So we're not talking about a population suffering from clinical depression. Just normal population showed a significant improvement in mood. So beyond just how they were feeling. Unfortunately, the same intervention has not been tested in folks with clinical depression to see if we get a similar boost in mood. So we don't know what role that would play in people, with major mental illness.
Well, I volunteer to be in that study if it ever comes
out.
So if inflammation plays a role, does that suggest that folks like me who have food allergies or food sensitivities, that if we're eating those food culprits, that it's creating inflammation that might possibly affect our mood?
Typically food allergies, I guess it's not, when we talk about pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory foods, we're usually talking about systemic inflammation as measured by markers such as C-reactive protein and IL-6 and interleukin-6, maybe tumor necrosis factor, TNF, as opposed to, for example, this IgE reaction that's typical of allergies or atopic disease. And so I guess you could kind of describe it as a type of inflammation, but may not translate into the same kind of brain inflammation that you get eating pro and anti-inflammatory foods. The pro-inflammatory foods, there's something called dietary inflammatory index, where they just look at all the studies, looking at every time they ever gave people food or food components, and see what happens to these things like C-reactive protein. See, does it go up? Does it go down? And so the most pro-inflammatory food components are saturated trans fatty acids. Thankfully, trans fats have been mostly removed from the food supply. Saturated fat found predominantly cheese and chicken, cake, pork. Those are the kind of the top 5 sources. And so by removing those foods or minimizing those foods, we would expect a decrease in inflammation. And then adding anti-inflammatory foods, which the most anti-inflammatory food component is fiber. And also flavones, which is a polyphenol found in a bunch of different healthy fruits and vegetables and chamomile tea. So eating fiber-rich foods, because your microbiome, your good gut flora, take the fiber we eat and produce these compounds called short-chain fatty acids like butyrate that are then absorbed into our bloodstream, circulate through our body, cross the blood-brain barrier, can have effects on our mood, on our mental health. And so but if we starve our microbial self, if we don't feed them the so-called prebiotics, which is fiber and resistant starch found only one place in abundance, that's whole plant foods, then they're not going to be churning out those anti-inflammatory molecules that'll make it up into our brain.
Awesome. So plant foods are high in fiber, and it's the fiber that has the greatest anti-inflammatory effect. Although it's not the fiber itself, it's the byproducts, the fiber. From our good gut bugs that take the fiber,
and turned it into these anti-inflammatory components. But not all plant foods are good sources of fiber. For example, fruit juice doesn't have typically any fiber at all. We're talking about whole plant foods, so not processed plant foods. So, I mean, technically, like Coca-Cola, it's kind of a plant food, came from sugar beets or sugar cane, right? Twinkies has plant components, but no, we're talking about whole plant foods. That's where we're going to find the most fiber, particularly whole grains and legumes, beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils.
Yummy. So it sounds like that our gut microbiome, the byproducts of what's going on in our gut can affect our brain, our mental health, how we feel.
And you can actually prove that by doing what are called fecal transplant studies, where you can actually transplant stool from one person to another and actually see a difference in mental health just by having someone else's microbiome in your gut. You can actually change your mental health, proving therefore cause and effect that it's your gut bugs that are doing it. But again, doesn't matter what kind of good bugs you have. If you starve them, if you don't feed them, then they're just going to die off, and then you're going to lose the benefit.
So we need a constant supply of whole foods, whole natural plant foods in our
3 times a day plus snacks.
It's nice that you advocate for snacks. So do processed foods have an effect on our mental health or our gut microbiome?
Well, so processed foods are typically missing those prebiotics. They've had intentionally the fiber removed from them. And so we're not going to be providing that fodder for that bounty of goodness for our microbiome when we process foods. Of course, processed foods also have a lot of things like artificial sweeteners or table sugar, or excess sodium, all sorts of things we don't want for a whole variety of reasons. And by eating processed foods, we are basically muscling out of our diet. There's only so much food we're going to eat in one day, right? And so we're muscling out some of these more helpful foods. And so I really encourage people, particularly those who are having issues, whether physiological, psychological, to check out my Daily Dozen, for example. It's a free app, Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen, where it just talks about kind of trying to encourage people to fit some of the healthiest of healthy foods into their daily routine.
So that sounds like, what's usually common knowledge. You want to bulk up and fill up on all the nutrient dense whole foods. And then if you want a little cookie or something, make it at the end of your biggest meal of the day. So you've had all the calories and nutrition that your body needs and you're not filling up on the junk food.
Or eat an apple.
Okay, fine. So what is the connection between omega-3 fatty acids and brain health? Because we hear about omega-3 fatty acids all the time, but really, what is the role that they play?
Our about a third of our brain, the dry weight of our brain, is a long chain omega-3 fatty acid called DHA, and docosahexaenoic acid. And so when people call us fatheads, it's like kind of the truth. Like that's where a lot of this builds up. Now, our bodies can create that DHA from something called ALA, alpha-linolenic acid. These short chain of fatty acids that are found predominantly in flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, little dark green leafy vegetables. One of the reasons I encourage people to eat a tablespoon of ground flax seeds every day, that's one of my daily dozen, is because I want them to get about those 2 grams of ALA, which their bodies can then elongate into the long chain of fatty acids important for cognitive health, like DHA. These are the so-called fish fats that your body can make itself. Some people get DHA preformed in fish oil or fish, but unfortunately what they're also getting are the contaminants. Unfortunately, we've made, our waterways are humanity's sewers these days. such that, all the mercury from all the coal plants in China eventually settles in the ocean and builds up the food chain, such that, particularly if we eat longer lived fish or larger fish, they've built up contaminants like PCBs and DDT, and dioxins and toxic heavy metals like mercury. And so even in distilled fish oil, you can't get rid of some of those lighter toxic contaminants. And so really we'd like to have a pollutant-free source of omega-3s. And so that's either, eating your flax and walnuts and chia seeds or hemp seeds, or you can actually take preformed pollutant-free DHA in the form of algae-based DHA, and you can, and that's where the fish get it from in the first place. These are essential fats. Our bodies don't make them. The fish's bodies don't make them either. They eat the algae, and so we can cut out the middle fish by going straight to, and this is particularly important for older men who don't seem to be as efficient in that process of converting the short chain fatty acids from plants into the long chains.
Okay, so fish oil, bad. 1 tablespoon of ground flax per day, or algae-derived DHA supplements, good. That's what.
So 250 milligrams of a pollutant-free DHA supplement would be the dose.
Okay. I noticed that on the mornings, I always start my day with a healthy blueberry or strawberry fruit smoothie, which is a recipe I got from you many years ago when
Oh,
you had
great.
VHS tape.
You can put some ground flax seeds in that, make it nice and thick.
Yes.
Great way to get your flax.
Yep, I do spinach and sometimes flax or sometimes hemp seed, and I usually do some citrus fruit with my blueberries. So I start the day every day with that. And
You're
sometimes
making me hungry.
I know, I look forward to it every morning. But sometimes I also have a bowl of oatmeal or whole grains like amaranth or millet. I try to vary it, but I notice on the days where I do have those whole grains that my brain feels so much more focused and energized. Am I imagining that, or are whole grains magical in some way?
Well, I mean, so when people think of fiber, they're thinking of like fruits and vegetables, right? That's where I'm going to get my fiber. But actually, fruits and vegetables are 80 to 90% water. They're actually mostly water. And so again, there's some really water, like greens are over 90% water. And so really the more concentrated sources of fiber are the drier plant foods like the whole grains and the legumes, the beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, because they have much more fiber per serving. And so you're eating a big smoothie, you think, oh my God, I'm getting tons of fiber. And indeed, if you're adding something like ground flax, it does have a lot of fiber, which is fantastic. But the whole grain is just, fiber central. And so you may be feeding your bugs better on the days you're eating the whole grains than even after eating all those fruits and vegetables.
And I also notice when I do eat a bowl of whole grains in the morning, I'm much less anxious. I'm much more relaxed and my brain feels at peace.
That is, the USPSTF, the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force just came out with a recommendation for screening children for anxiety. Just this last week. And that really inspired me to do a deep dive into diet and anxiety because it's such an epidemic. So stay tuned on nutritionfacts.org for a bunch of videos. I'm going to do a whole video series on what we can do diet and lifestyle approaches to not only to generalized anxiety disorder and social anxiety disorder and just people feeling anxious but don't actually make the diagnosis. So there's tons of literature out there. The only reason I don't have a lot more videos on anxiety is because the last time I looked, there just wasn't a lot of research out there, but now there's tons. And so in fact, I'll maybe do a webinar about it. So yeah, you can sign up for a free email newsletter. In fact, everything on the website's free, no ads, not selling anything. So yeah, check it out. And so anxiety videos are coming.
Awesome. So you heard it here first, folks. Nutritionfacts.org to get your food and anxiety related videos in the next few months or so. One What does sugar do to our brains? Why do we feel so lousy after we eat something that's really sugary?
Well, it's possible it's not the sugar itself. Sugar comes along with a lot of bad stuff
Mm.
typically. I mean, the way the food industry likes to do is mix kind of sugar and fat to really light up our brains because that increases the caloric density. So that's like something like frosting or something. Or if you think of, like peanut butter and jelly, you think sugar, fat, like a lot of junk food, sugar and fat. And so it's hard to kind of differentiate. Like if you just like took a tablespoon of sugar and just ate a tablespoon of sugar, you may not have kind of the same, you may not feel the same as if you ate, a half a Twinkie with the same amount of sugar, something like that.
Why don't physicians ask their patients about what they're eating? I now it's great to see that when I go for my annual physical, I'm given a mental health questionnaire
Okay,
and
good,
substance use disorder questionnaire. And sometimes they
good,
even ask about caffeine intake, but it
okay.
never really goes beyond that to ask about, am I drinking enough water each day? Am
Mhm.
I exercising every day? And what would a typical day look like for me in terms of what I eat?
Oh my
Nobody
God,
asks.
that's what we need. That's what we need. And so, yeah, it's great that they're incorporating some of these other aspects. But according to the Global Burden of Disease study, the largest study of risk factors for human disease in history, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the number one cause of death in these United States is the American diet, bumping tobacco smoking to number two. Cigarettes not only kill about 500,000 Americans, whereas our diet kills many more, also a leading cause of disability. And so, if diet is the number one cause of death, then you think, well, obviously, nutrition is the number one thing they teach in medical school, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, it's the number one thing your doctor talks to you about at every single visit, right? But there's this disconnect between the science and the mainstream practice of medicine. And part of it is there's this severe nutrition deficiency in education among our medical professionals. Less than a quarter of medical schools in the country have a single dedicated course in nutrition. And so they graduate with this without this powerful medical tool in their toolbox. And so they just may not feel confident about speaking to patients about, how they can improve their health through diet. And of course, there's also other factors like reimbursement issues. Typically, doctors aren't paid to tell people how to take better care of themselves. And also time constraints. I mean, it's easier to just write someone a prescription. And also, the big pharma, the drug companies play a role in medical education and practice. You can ask your doctor when's the last time they were taken out to dinner by Big Broccoli. It's probably been a while. It's just that's just how the system works.
Dr. Greger, you mentioned a few minutes ago you have a daily dozen. What is your daily dozen?
So these are the healthiest of healthy foods. I encourage people to fit into their daily routine. So berries, the healthiest fruits, the greens, the healthiest vegetables, the legumes, a tablespoon of ground flaxseed, quarter teaspoon of turmeric, the best beverages, the best how much exercise to get, all that. And it's available as a free app on iPhone, Android. I have videos about it as well. I talk about more depth and how not to die if you want to check out your local library. And again, it's just kind of an aspirational encourage you. It's like a checklist you can check throughout the day. And by the end of the day, like, oh, I didn't get any flax today. Maybe I'll sprinkle some on my whatever, my supper or whatever. Just it's nothing, it's just like, just to just keep people it's kind of inspire people to include some of these healthy foods in hopes that it'll kind of, muscle out some of the less healthy options out there.
So your daily dozen is a convenient phone app that you can find anywhere you get your phone apps, and it gives you a checklist of the 12 things you should have every day. So it makes staying
Ideally,
healthy easy.
ideally, but
Yeah.
don't go crazy. No need to obsess about it. But particularly when I'm traveling, I'm lucky if I get half.
Whoa.
But you do your best, and then if you don't do good one day, you do better the next day. No big deal.
I love that attitude. We're not perfect, and we don't want to become obsessive and create something else to have anxiety over.
Exactly.
Dr. Greger, is there anything that I haven't mentioned today that you wanted to share with the audience?
Oh, well, one thing I would say is that it's just thinking about the anxiety thing. I think the only interventional study I profile in a video on nutrition facts for generalized anxiety disorder is butternut squash seeds. You say, well, where are you going to get butternut squash seeds? In butternut squash. This is the season. Open up the butternut squash, you scoop out the seeds, and you can just toast them in a toaster with a little chili powder or whatever. But there was a study that actually randomized people to eat butternut squash seeds in a bar. And that one was a placebo bar that had none, and one had the actual butternut squash seeds. They both tasted, looked the same, so no one knew who was in which group until they broke the code. They had significant improvement in those with generalized anxiety disorder to the butternut squash seed consumption.
Wow.
So the reason is it's kind of a low protein, high tryptophan food, and the tryptophan is used, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it's used by your body to make serotonin. And I go into the whole mechanism in the video, but anyone with anxiety should check that out and then wait for my entire series of anxiety videos to come.
Well, when you publish those videos, I will share them on our website and in our newsletter and on our YouTube page. If folks want to follow you and learn more about what you're doing and watch your videos, where should they go to find you?
They should go to nutritionfacts.org. Everything on the website's free. No ads, no commercial sponsorship, strictly non-commercial, not selling anything, no kickbacks. Just put it up as a public service, as a labor of love, as a tribute to my grandma.
That's beautiful, Dr. Greger. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. It's really helpful, and I hope that we can chat with you again, perhaps when you have more videos that you want to share and promote.
I can't wait. Looking forward to it.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.